We aren't strangers to activists toppling statues or targeting art, but this time it's the first official portrait of King Charles that's been vandalised. Have a look. Now, these protesters from a group named Animal Rising said they were highlighting the failure of the RSPCA to prevent cruelty to farm animals. King Charles is the patron of the organisation. Joining me to discuss whether the vandals improved the portrait is media writer at The Australian, Sophie Ellsworth. Sophie, I'm joking, of course. Whatever you think of the portrait, and most people hated it, this sort of behaviour is unacceptable, but sadly, it's becoming all too common nowadays.
Well, it certainly is, James. But what really baffled me was how these protesters managed to march through, get that close to the portrait, and then with these paint, tins and brushes and so forth, no one seemed to bat an eyelid. I mean, how on earth they got that far and were able to cause this destruction shows the British are obviously far more trusting. I don't think you could do that here in Australia. But that aside, even if you don't like the artwork, I think this is shocking that this continues to happen. But they're probably getting what they want now. James, the fact that we're talking about it, it's making headlines all around the world. They're trying to raise their issues with the RSPCA, and so they're getting exactly what they want, which is a real shame.
Yeah, look, you report on media all the time, so let me ask you this, because you're quite right. They do it, then we talk about it, publicity achieved. So should we just not talk about it at all? But we kind of need to talk about it, don't we? So how do you resolve that dilemma?
Well, it is a case, do we ignore it? But this is news, James. This is making headlines. This is a famous portrait because it only came out in recent weeks, and it is of King Charles. So we do need to discuss it. But, it's a tricky situation because now we're giving these fools the oxygen that they want. So do you ignore it? If you do ignore it, I guess they don't get what they want and then perhaps they'd move on. But sadly, this is the media cycle because they post this stuff up on social media. It goes viral and then we all talk about it.
Of course, the alternative is that we don't blame the media, but we blame the legal system because these people never really seem to get the book thrown at them, do they?
Well, that's right, James. Very rarely do they get the book thrown at them. They're often given a little slap on the wrist. They go on their merry way and then they rinse and repeat. They just do the same thing over and over again. So this is a real shame that it keeps happening. It keeps making headlines. We seem to be doing these stories all the time. It's becoming so commonplace. And I guess that's also the power of social media because these activists know how to tap in. They know how to make this stuff go viral. And then it's making headlines as it has all around the world.
Just while we're talking about this, there was a protest a couple of years ago at a Volkswagen factory in Germany where eco-activists glued themselves to the shop floor. So the staff, instead of, fussing over these protesters, they just switched off the lights, turned off the heating and went home, leaving the protesters glued to the floor overnight. And then the protesters moaned that their hands hurt and they couldn't go to the toilet. Have a listen to one of the protesters from that event.
Electricity was cut, heating was cut, food did not arrive. Yesterday they brought us some pizza, today nothing. I asked for a medical visit and I had to insist a lot. In principle, they didn't want to allow even a doctor to come here and visit me. So this is the treatment that we have received. So definitely they did not want to encourage our protest at all.
I just can't find a violin small enough to play as background music for that poor protester, Sophie.